وأصحابه أجمعين ما بعد. So inshallah, jazakumullah khair everyone for coming. Inshallah, what we're going to be doing today is learning the exact, precise method of praying according to the hadith, according to the way that we have been taught. And inshallah, as an FYI, this is meant to be the first of monthly workshops, meaning some lectures will be in this format with the PowerPoint, and other lectures, inshallah, the fourth Friday of every month. The goal is to invite someone from outside to help and benefit our community with something that they feel that would be beneficial. So inshallah, next month we will be having Sheikh Rizwan from ICN benefiting us, inshallah. So today what we will be covering is the correct method of prayer. I will be going over the correct method of prayer for both the brothers and sisters. Inshallah, as we go through the descriptions, I will also demonstrate for the brothers the correct method. And if the brothers have any questions at any time, just raise your hand, inshallah, and then I will allow you, then you can, inshallah, voice your question. And I think the sisters have a pen and paper. Is that, they have a pen and paper, and towards the end of the workshop, you can, inshallah, put your paper towards the partition, and I will take a look there, inshallah. So, I don't think we need to really go into the importance of prayer. Alhamdulillah, we all know that. We all know the importance of prayer and how the Quran describes the importance of prayer. I want to just inform us what we will be doing in this workshop before we just get right into it. So, of course, when it comes to prayer, there are proofs for everything. There's a discussion regarding how everything, why every ruling is the way that it is. There's also external discussions in terms of like what breaks the salah, what doesn't break the salah. If you have any questions regarding that, you can ask that at the end. But this workshop is not intended to discuss proofs or to anything that is related to debate in terms of the differences between the Hanafi madhab and the Shafi madhab, or the Shafi madhab and the Maliki madhab. We're not here to discuss those differences. If you have any questions such as, I heard this method of prayer, is this correct? You can ask, inshallah. But the point is not to go into any differences that we may be aware of. I don't want to confuse anyone, so we're going to be covering a description that is mentioned according to the hadith, and something that inshallah we can all implement. So I think that's very important for us to know. So we're just going to be talking about the practical aspects, also practical and many mistakes that people can make, and then the differences between the salah of a brother and sister, inshallah. So, of course, there are the daily prayers, there is the witr prayer, there is the Eid prayer, there is the janazah prayer. But we won't really go into the details of the Eid prayer. We'll talk a little bit about the janazah prayer. Eid prayer, you all are, mashallah, we're reminded of the procedure of Eid prayer every Eid. So we don't need to go into the details of that. We're going to be focusing on daily prayers and the witr prayer. And when we talk about the daily prayers, okay, we're going to talk about it from two perspectives. We're going to talk about it from the perspective if we are praying individually. Like if you're praying at home by yourself. But if you're praying by yourself and you're not behind the imam, there are a certain set of rules, certain set of ahkam. And then when you are behind the imam, there's different set of rulings. Okay? So we will discuss the differences there. The differences between when you're praying behind the imam and when you're praying individually. We'll talk about that. And then we'll discuss the witr prayer, the janazah prayer, and if anyone has any questions, you can ask. And if you have any questions as we're going through the procedure, you can just raise your hand. You don't have to wait till the end. So you can ask. And if the sisters, you have a question that you would like to ask right away, you feel that you may forget it, then you can, inshallah, just voice your question immediately. You can just interrupt me and then voice your question, inshallah. So I think what's very important to keep in mind before we begin, certain principles that were implemented, right? So when we look at the description of prayer and we gather them from the hadith, from what the ulama have described in their commentaries and in the books, they kept in mind certain principles that we learned from the Sharia. What are these principles? Okay, this is very important, and we'll be covering this over and over. You'll see me reiterating this over and over as we cover the different positions of the prayer. So the first is that women will always adopt the posture that is most concealing. Okay? So when we see the differences between the brothers and sisters in prayer, the reason why there's a difference is because the sisters are adopting a posture which is the most concealed. Okay? Number two, the follower, meaning when you are behind an imam, very important. You'll see me talk about this when we discuss qiyam. The follower does not recite any Quran. Right? I'll talk a little bit more about that when we're discussing the standing, when we're standing behind, when we're standing, what are the things that we're supposed to do. The third principle is that all non-Quran recitation in qiyam is inaudible. Right? So the ta'awwudh, the basmala, all these things are more or less, you're not going to recite them loudly. The takbir is said while changing position. Okay, and this last one is mainly what is applicable for each salah. Right? Because some of you might ask, in each salah we just raise our hands for the extra takbirat. Right? Why do we only raise our hands? Why do we not fold our hands? Okay, this principle actually addresses that question. So in each salah, you will say the takbir, then you will fold your hands and say the thana. And then you will do 3 additional takbirs and you will not fold the hands. Why is there a difference between the takbirat there in Eid? Well, the answer is mentioned here in the principle, that you will tie the hands, right, when there is a sunnah dhikr that's prescribed for that moment. So in Eid Salah, there's actually a sunnah dhikr after the first takbir. Right, when you say Allahu Akbar and you fold the hands in Eid, you're supposed to say Subhanaka Allahumma bihamdika until the end. Right? So you're not going to so you're going to tie your hands then. And in the other takbirs, you're not saying anything. There's no dhikr. Right? For that reason, we're not going to tie the hands there. Okay? And you'll see this come up again when we discuss the qiyam position. Okay, now let's go ahead and talk about the daily prayers. Okay? So, what are we supposed to do? So and again, I want us to keep something in mind. As we are discussing the procedure that I'm going to mention in terms of what we're supposed to be doing is the best way to pray. Okay? Meaning, if the first thing you're supposed to do when you start off is the feet for the men are supposed to be approximately 4 fingers apart. This is the best way. If somebody's feet are more wide than that, does that mean your salah is broken? Of course, it doesn't mean your salah is broken, right? So when I'm giving this description, this is according to the best way of praying, right? This is the best way of praying. There are some books that are written in English, right, that talk about the proofs and all the discussions. Mufti Rahman Mungera from the UK has a book on this. Mufti Yusuf has a book on this called Ascension of the Believer, where he actually talks about all these details. If you want more details, you can refer to those books. But what we're describing is the best way to pray. This is very important to note. So if you're not doing the best thing, at times it doesn't break your prayer. It's very important to know. But if I mention a description and you're not sure, if I do something else, will that break my prayer or not? You can go ahead and raise your hand and ask that question. So for men, when you are standing, your feet are supposed to be 4 fingers apart. Okay? Supposed to be 4 fingers apart. Now, of course, when you're standing, right, no one's really going to go like this. It's approximate, right? It's approximate. So someone could be standing like this, and this is really sufficient. This would count as the best way of praying. Something like this, right? Basically, what we're trying to say is it shouldn't be so much like this. At the very least, okay, the best way of praying is keeping your feet 4 fingers apart. Okay, which means it's less than shoulder length, right? Shoulder width. But at the most, right, it should be a shoulder width, because if you go more than that, now you are disturbing the person next to you. It's very important. So the best way is to keep it 4 fingers apart. Something like this would be sufficient. This is good, right? Anything like this is fine, but moving further more than that, it's not good. So that's important to know. For the sisters, of course, the feet are going to be very close together. They're going to be very close together. Again, so that's one of the differences right away. For the brothers, the feet are going to be spread apart more. For the sisters, it's going to be very close. Now, something that's very important to note that when we are starting our prayer, what I see many people doing, all right, and is we look down when we start our prayer. Okay? We're not supposed to actually look down when we start our prayer. This is the same for both brothers and sisters. Okay? We're not supposed to look down when we are starting our prayer. So when you start your prayer, I wish I had a clip-on mic because I want to put the mic down. It's okay. If you hear, can everyone hear me? Inshallah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It won't
Yeah.
reach this far.
Can you make it little
Sorry?
bigger?
I think this is fine. Yeah.
Okay.
So inshallah, so the way that we're supposed to start our prayer, I mean, if there's a stand, you can grab the stand. No, that's fine. Actually, that's fine. So your palms are supposed to be open. So your fingers should not be like this. Okay, your fingers should not be like tied in. Some people, they start the prayer like this, right? You want to make sure your hands are open. All right, number one. Number two, you want to make sure that your fingers and palm are facing the Qibla. Again, this is the same for both brothers and sisters. And then number three, you want to make sure that you look straight when you start. Okay? You're not going to be starting like this. You're not going to start your prayer like this. If you are to start your prayer like that, again, that doesn't nullify your salah. That's not the best way to start. You won't be starting by looking down. You're supposed to start by looking forward. Okay? Looking forward towards the Qibla. Your hands are open. The palm, everything is open like this. And then number four, technically, is how high are your hands supposed to go? Right? That's the question. Yeah, I'll wait for them. So how high are your hands supposed to go? So technically for the brothers, it should be at the earlobes. For the sisters, the shoulder length. Okay? Now this is important to note. Many people, when they start their prayer, they feel like they have to touch the ears. You have to go like this, right? Now this is something that is like been widespread from back home. Why? Because the books mention that your hand should reach your earlobe. It should be at your ear length. So in order for a person to assure that their hands have reached the ear length, they touch the ears. Right? That's how it like spread. But touching the earlobes is not a condition. It just has to be like this, right? You're not even actually supposed to touch the ears. If you do, again, it's not like detrimental to your salah or anything like that. For again, the sisters is going to be at the shoulders. For the brothers, you're going to be looking, as the both are going to be looking forward. Palms, hands are going to be spread out, looking forward. Brothers, just like this, okay? And then as you tie your hands, your gaze will go down to where you expect to be making sajda. So your eyes will go from the Qibla to where you're going to be making sajda as you tie your hands. Okay. Now, how are the sisters supposed to tie their hands? The sisters should put their right palm on their left hand like this, and then on the chest like this, with the fingers not tied, just like this. So the right hand on the left hand, the right palm on the left hand, like this. For the brothers, okay, your hands are technically supposed to be just below the navel, slightly below the navel. Right? It's not supposed to be here. It's not supposed to be like down, like here. Just below the navel. And the best way to tie your hands is to take your thumb and your pinky, circle your wrist, and then the three fingers over like this. This is the description according to the books. You're supposed to tie your pinky and your thumb over the wrist, and then spread your three fingers like this. And hands just below the navel, just like this. So when you're starting, okay, you're going to be just like this. That's how you do it. And then for the sisters, just like this. Now, niyyah, okay, very important. In terms of niyyah for the salah, the niyyah does not have to be articulated. Meaning, if you do not say the niyyah out loud, you don't say the niyyah, as long as you know in your mind what it is that you're praying. Right? That's the bare minimum. That as long as you know in your mind what it is that you're praying. So you know that you're about to pray whatever salah it is, that is the bare minimum requirement. That's important to keep in mind. So the niyyah doesn't have to be articulated, it's just basically what's going on in your mind, and that's how you will start the prayer. Okay. So as I mentioned, we will spread out the feet, we will lift the hands, we will lift the hands to the ears, women will lift their hands to the shoulders, we will face the qibla when we're saying takbir to tahrima is the first takbir, and then as we tie our hands, we're going to be lowering our eyes to the place of sajda, and we're supposed to put our eyes at the place of sajda. That's how we start the prayer. Okay, now when we have now begun the prayer, we've made our niyyah, we've done it in that way, we've tied our hands. And now there's two different rulings. If you're praying individually, there's one ruling. If you're praying behind the imam, there's another ruling. Okay? So of course you're supposed to look where you expect to make the sajda. Everyone will recite the salah inaudibly, silently. And reciting the salah is sunnah, which means that we should do it. Okay? And then if you're reciting individually, you will say the ta'awudh in the first rakat, you'll say a'udhu billah, you'll say the basmalah softly. And if you are praying individually, you will recite Fatiha. Okay? If you are praying behind the imam, very important. Again, I'm not going to like the differences and whatnot. But if you are praying behind the imam, you will not recite any Quran. If you are praying behind the imam, you will not recite any Quran, brothers or sisters. This is regardless if the prayer is Fajr, Dhuhr, Asr, Maghrib, or Isha. Even if it is Dhuhr prayer where the imam is not reciting loud. Okay? When you're behind the imam, you're not going to recite any Quran. So when you're behind the imam, the only thing you're going to be saying is the thana, subhanaka Allahumma, until the end. And then you will remain quiet. You will not recite any Quran. There's a hadith, مَنْ كَانَ لَهُ إِمَامٌ فَقِرَاءَةُ الْإِمَامِ قِرَاءَةٌ لَهُ. Whoever has an imam, then the recitation of the imam is the recitation for those who are standing behind him. It's a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. Yes?
So if you're a little late, then you say Salah or...
Okay, very good. If you're a little bit late, and the imam is, if it's Fajr, Maghrib or Isha, and the imam is reciting Quran, then you should just listen to the Quran. If you're joining late and the imam is reciting Quran, you should not recite the Salah. But if it's Dhuhr or Asr, where the imam is not reciting Quran, then yes, you should do the salah. Even if you join and the imam is in their third rakat or second rakat. If you join and it's the silent prayer, then you will recite the salah. So right, if you join a Maghrib salah in the third rakat, imam is reciting the third rakat, right? So you will say the salah when you join. And then same thing, if you join Isha salah and it's the third or fourth rakat, then you will say the salah. But if you're joining when the imam is reciting Quran, you will not say the salah as you join.
If you're joining the ruku, then you don't recite Salah?
No. If you join the ruku, if the imam is in ruku, you say the takbir, you will tie your hands for a moment, and you go straight into ruku. You don't say the salah. You will try to catch the imam in ruku. Yes.
Instead of saying is the best way, you please qualify that is one of the way.
Sure. I see it, that's fine. But yeah, that's fine. One of the best ways to okay. So if you're praying individually, of course, you recite Surah Al-Fatiha, and you will recite the surah after Surah Al-Fatiha. If it's the first two rakahs of any of the prayers, right? If you are behind the imam and the imam recites Surah Al-Fatiha, then you should say Ameen. Right? If you're behind the imam and the imam recites Surah Al-Fatiha, you should say Ameen, but it should be silently. If a person says Ameen loudly, right, audibly, again, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, it's not makruh or anything like that. Again, the adab. There's a hadith of Umar radiallahu anhu, right? So I'll mention some hadith. Just so I remember. Umar radiallahu anhu said in one hadith that there are certain things the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam did silently. Right? And one of the things Umar radiallahu anhu said that when the Prophet ﷺ would finish Fatiha and he would recite Ameen, he would recite that Ameen softly. Hadith Umar. So when the Prophet ﷺ finished Fatiha, he recited Ameen softly, according to the description of Umar. So therefore, if you're behind the Imam, you should also recite, you should say the Ameen, because there's virtue in that, but you should try to make it soft. Again, if you're in Salah and you say the Ameen softly and the person next to you says it loud, there's no need to go tell the person or to correct them or to argue with them. Leave that alone. Our purpose here is to make sure we're doing the right thing. It's not our job to go police around everyone else. Right? We don't have to debate or argue with them. That's very important to keep in mind.
Brother Arif,
Yes.
does that mean if somebody is saying loudly is wrong?
No, that's what I'm saying. That's what I mentioned. I said if somebody says it loud, it's not wrong, right? Because it's okay. But what's better is to say it softly because we know the Prophet ﷺ says so, right? So that does not mean that if someone says it loud that there are it's makruh or wrong. We won't say that is wrong. We're not going to say that it's wrong. All right, very good. Now, once we're done with the first rakat and we are moving into ruku', there's a particular way that the brothers will be making ruku', and there's a particular way that the sisters will be making ruku'. When the brothers make ruku', okay, we'll be making ruku', of course. Now, it's very important. The bare minimum requirement, okay, is to make sure your hands touch your knees. Okay? So if somebody was to do this, if a brother was to pray salah and just go like this, right? Technically, they're in ruku'. It's a very weird ruku'. It's not the best way to do ruku'. But if a person was to do this, then that is ruku'. Okay, but that is not the best way to make ruku'. But the way that a brother is going to be making ruku' is by taking your hands. You're supposed to basically grab your knees, spread your fingers apart, okay, like this. Okay, then you will posture your back as straight as possible. Okay, and then you will look in between the feet. Your back should try to be straight, your head straight, and you're looking in between the feet. Okay? The best way is to basically grab your knees like this. This is the best way. By grabbing your knees, spreading out the fingers. Okay? That is the best way to do the ruku'. For sisters, the requirement of the sister, what sisters should do is only bend for the amount that it takes to touch the knees. Just like this, that's it. They will not grab like the brothers, they're just going to be touching the knees. That's it. And there's no description of the women or the sisters spreading their fingers. It's just going to be in the normal position with the fingers like this, and then just reaching until the knees. Now, once a brother or sister is in the ruku' position, of course, it's sunnah and it's best to at least say the takbir, to say the tasbih, Subhana Rabbi al-Azim. Should say it at least 3 times. Okay, 3 times is, of course, it's what a person should do, and we should say Subhana Rabbi al-Azim. When the Sahaba were with the Prophet ﷺ, they came across the ayah. فسبح what's the last ayah of Surah Al-Waqi'ah? فسبح باسم ربك العظيم. فسبح باسم ربك العظيم. So when the Sahaba recited this, the Prophet ﷺ said, اجعلوه في ركوعكم. So recite this in your ruku'. So this is why we say Subhana Rabbil Azim, because technically we're acting upon that ayah of the Quran where Allah commands for you to do tasbih of Rabbil Azim. So when the Sahaba read that verse, the Prophet commanded the Sahaba, and therefore this is what we should say. And there is a virtue behind it as well, which is that in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, right, the rulers were known as Azim. They were known as Azim ur-Rum. Like for example, the ruler of Rome was known as Azim ur-Rum. So when people would come to the rulers, what would they do when they come to the Azim of Rome? They would bow down. Right? So when we bow down to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we're saying, you are the most glorious. There's no one more azim than you, right? And therefore, we're also saying it because the hadith, right? If a person, I get asked this question, if a person ends up saying Subhana Rabbiyal A'la in the ruku' by accident, right? If somebody says Subhana Rabbiyal A'la, they reverse what we say in sajda with what we are saying and they say it in the ruku' by accident, that is still fine. That does not like nullify your salah or anything like this, okay? That's just an FYI. If that was to ever happen, you were to say Subhana Rabbil A'la in your ruku', right, because you forgot or something, then your ruku' is 100% fine still, okay? But we're taught by the Prophet ﷺ to say Subhana Rabbiyal Azim, okay? You will say that, you should try to say it 3 times, okay? And of course that's the same for both the brothers and their sisters. You should say it at least 3 times. Now when you get up, when you're behind the imam will say, "Qad sami Allahu liman hamida," and then those who are behind him will say one of 4 things. Okay? According to the hadith, there's one of 4 things that a person can say. They're all very similar to one another. Allahumma rabbana wa lakal hamd. Allahumma rabbana lakal hamd. Rabbana wa lakal hamd, or Rabbana lakal hamd. There's a slight difference between all of those. Many of the books say it's best to say the longest one. Because technically the more dhikr you do in salah, the more reward you get. So if you say Allahumma rabbana wa lakal hamd, that's the best. Because therefore you did more dhikr, and then inshallah you can expect to be given more reward. But if you say Rabbana lakal hamd, Rabbana wa lakal hamd, then that is still fine. But when you're behind the imam, you will only say that. The imam will say Sami Allahu liman hamida, and you will just say Rabbana, Allahumma Rabbana wa lakal hamd. However, when the imam says any of the other takbirat, if you're behind the imam says Allahu Akbar, you should also say Allahu Akbar. When the imam says Allahu Akbar to go into ruku', you should also say it. But when the imam says Sami Allahu liman hamida to come up from the ruku', you will not say it. Only the imam will say that. You will say Allahumma Rabbana wa lakal hamd, the imam will not say it. Okay? So for all the takbeers that the imam does, the follower should do except this. Yes. Sorry? I cannot hear you.
You're praying individually.
Right, of course, if you're praying individually, right, so that's that you bring into Vietnam. If you are praying individually, then of course you say Sami Allahu liman hamida, and you will say Allahumma Rabbana wa lakal hamd. You will say both of those. Yes.
Does the Imam also say Allahumma?
No, the Imam does not say that.
Okay.
This is where the Imam will only say Sami Allahu liman hamida, not say anything else. And then the follower will only say Allahumma Rabbana wa lakal hamd. So the Imam will not say that. Of course, someone is the Imam and they say that, there's no problem, there's no issue. But the adab is not for the Imam not to say. Very good. Yes. No, you will say it softly. So the principle that I mentioned is that, of course, anything that is not Quran, whether you are praying by yourself or behind the Imam, you will always say that softly. Yes. So anything that is not Quran, when you're praying by yourself or with the Imam, it will always be soft. It will always be inaudible. Yes. Where only you can hear it. Right? Where you're not saying it very loud. Where you can hear, or it's not very loud. I mean, it's possible you say it yourself and the person next to you hears it, that's fine. But there's different thing like Allahumma Rabbana wa lakal hamd. Allahumma Rabbana. It's just very Allahumma Rabbana wa lakal hamd. Very soft. Not very loud. So you don't want to really disturb the person behind you. Or like next to you, just say it softly, or only you can hear it. Okay. Now, so when you're going from ruku' to qawm, that is what you will say. You will, if you're behind the imam or by yourself, you will say Allahumma Rabbana wa lakal hamd. And then you will stand for at least a moment until the body comes to a rest. Okay? This is very important. Some people, very important because there's some common mistakes many people make. Some people will do this, and I've seen this a lot, especially it's more common from the elderly, and we can understand why it's common because it may be difficult for them. They want to just go from the ruku and then go straight into sajda. So some people will do this. They will do the ruku like this, and then they will just kind of like get up and go down. right? Okay, this will break your salah. Very important. And even if a person is elderly or anything, if you, after the ruku', if you do not stand there for a moment, right? You go like this, and if you do not stand there for a moment, where your body rested for a moment, okay, and you just go like this, and you just kind of get up and go down, your salah is broken. Your salah is broken. It's very important. Okay, so in order for that to be fulfilled of salah, again, this is the fard of salah, then you will make sure that your body has stood for a moment, okay? Then you will proceed into the sajda. Very, very important, right? So I remember when I was learning how to drive in my driver's ed class back in high school. So my teacher, he mentioned a story once about how important it was to stop at a stop sign. So he said that he stopped at a stop sign. He didn't really stop at a stop sign. I guess he made up the story just to teach us a lesson, just to tell us. So he didn't really stop at the stop sign. He kind of just rolled through, and the cop was behind him. He pulled him over. The cop said, I pulled you over. He said, why? He said, because you didn't stop at the stop sign. He said, I slowed down. That's enough. He said, what are you supposed to do at the stop sign? You're supposed to stop, not slow down. The person said, well, slow down is enough, right? Slow down is enough. I didn't crash them. Slow down is enough. So the cop took his nightstick and began hitting the guy. And the guy said, stop. He said, should I stop or should I slow down? There's a difference, right? So we thought to ourselves, okay, there's a difference between stopping and slowing down. So there's a difference between just getting up and going down and actually standing for a moment. You have to make sure you stood for a moment. Because one of the aspects of prayer is something in the book that they call ta'deel al-arkan, that you perform all of the aspects of salah correctly. And if you get up without standing for a moment and go down right away, this fard of salah is broken. So that's why the salah is broken, because that component is broken. Okay, very good. So now when we are going from qawma into sajda, how are we supposed to go from after ruku into sajda? Now this is the same for both brothers and sisters. The best way to go into the sajda is by doing the following. Okay, what do many people do? This, if somebody does it, will not break the salah, but it's not the best way to pray. It's not the best description. Many people, what they will do is after they come up from ruku, they will, inshallah, we stand for a moment. Okay. Now what we will do is we'll begin bending right away, right? And then we will begin bending right away. You're actually not supposed to bend your back until your knees touch the ground. Okay? So technically the way you're supposed to go is like this. After you get up from the ruku', you're supposed to be like this. Okay? This is the description according to the books and the hadith. Okay? You don't bend your back until your knees hit the ground, so your knees are supposed to hit the ground first. And then, of course, for the sisters, as we mentioned, they will pray in the most concealing manner. So they will keep their feet together, their hands as close to themselves, and they will not go forward that much. They will just, they will not bend forward too much. They will not spread their hands out, and they will keep their feet together, like basically as concealed as possible. Okay? This is what the sisters will do. For the brothers, what the brothers are supposed to do is when we're going from the standing position to sajda, again, if you were to bend your back, it's not like makruh, it's not anything like that. It's just not the best, not the way according to the way it's been described, not the best way. So you're supposed to keep your back straight until your knees hit the ground. Your knees hit the ground first, then your hands, then your nose and your forehead. Okay? Now, how far is your hand supposed to be spread out? Your hand should ideally be spread out like this for the brothers, okay, spread out. Your hand should be about shoulder width apart, and your nose should be in between. So if this is your hands, your nose should be in between, here, like this. Okay, this is the best way to do the sajda. Alright, where you're again, when you're after the qawma, we will go like this. The sisters will keep everything together. Right? For the brothers, we will wait for our knees to touch the ground. Then we'll place our hands, then our nose and our head. And our nose is supposed to be in between. In between where so meaning our palms are here, we shouldn't be like this. And also we shouldn't be like this. You follow me? It should be in between, like this. Okay? And then when you get up from the sajda to the sitting position, it's the same opposite way, which is the head, the forehead, the nose, then the hands. And when you're in sajda, of course, you should say Subhana Rabbiyal A'lam. This is, of course, the Sunnah dhikr, and we should say it 3 times. Okay? We're doing this. Right? And this is, and so we're supposed to say Subhana Rabbiyal A'la 3 times. I described everything that's over there. Okay, yes. The difference is that when we're in sajda, our fingers should be close together. In ruku, our hands are spread apart, and in sajda it's close together, yes.
Yeah. When you are praying, sitting on the chair, also explain that.
Gee, when you're sitting on the chair, everything changes. I mean, when you're sitting on the chair, praying while sitting on the chair is considered praying with mishal. Okay? Just to answer the brother's question. So technically you should not, the only time a person is allowed to pray on the chair is if they are not able to make sajda. If a person is not able to make sajda, there's some medical reason the doctors say you shouldn't do that, then a person is allowed to pray on a chair. And if a person is praying on a chair, like for example, I guess there's a little bit of a tangent, but the brother asked the question, like if you're on the airplane, and Qatar for some reason, Qatar has a policy that you are not allowed to pray standing up. Now, that's actually a policy of the airline. A Muslim airline that has a policy, you're not allowed to stand up and pray. People still do it, right? And when I was in Qatar Airlines, I prayed up, and there's like a rotation. You just have to be smart about it. Not 50 people praying right away, but people will still stand up and pray. But like if you're not able to pray, or if you're going on a domestic flight and really there's no place to pray, right? And you're praying on your seat, the same ruling. So what will happen if you're praying sitting down? The way that you will be making ruku and sajda is just by, so if you are sitting down, for ruku you will move forward just a little bit, and for sajda it just has to be a little bit more than that. That's it. So it's just going to be like this. For let's say ruku, I'm sitting like this. Ruku is just going to be like this, and sajda just has to be a little bit more. That's it. So if you're praying while sitting down, you don't even have to go all the way like this for sajda. You have to do that. In the ruling of praying while sitting down.
Because I have a knee problem, so I cannot go.
Right. So if there's a ruling, if there's a valid excuse, then yes. So for you, if that's the case, then you will just make ruku by moving forward just a little bit, and then sajda by moving forward a little bit more than you did for ruku.
Okay.
So that's the way it is. Yes.
Somebody that do in the sujood, they split the hand.
What do you mean?
No, like this way. The finger there, putting it not allowed.
Oh, right. Okay, yeah, we'll talk about that. When we talk about after the sajda and the jalsa position, I'll talk about the best way to do that, inshallah. So, right, so we've talked about sajda. When you're done with sajda, okay, and you're getting up from sajda, as I mentioned, you will get up in the opposite way from sajda. Now for the brothers, the best way to position your feet is like your left foot like this. The best way, they say, is that all of your fingers, all of your toes should be facing the qibla. So like the toes shoes should be faced like this, and the right foot should be up like this. Okay, up like this. If someone is like sitting like, like sometimes what people do is they sit like this, or they sit with both feet flat. Again, that doesn't like break your salah, but that's not the best way to pray. Also when in sajda. When in sajda, there are two ways that are completely fine. When you are in sajda, I forgot to mention, your feet can be together or they can be spread out. So when you are in sajda, your feet can be like this or they can be like this. Okay? Both are equally as described in hadith to be correct. Okay? Both ways. Now, so for brothers, that's how we will get into the jalsa position. And our eyes will be in between the knees. Here our eyes will be in between the knees. For the sisters, it's different. For the sisters, they will sit and their feet will be on the right side and the toes will be facing the qibla. So again, for the sisters, they will sit like this and the toes should be facing the qibla. So the sisters will sit like this and the brothers will sit like this. Now, when you are in between the sajda, as an FYI, when you are in between the sajda and you're getting up from sajda, there is a dua that is established in hadith, if you would like to say it. Again, it's not required, but there is a dua. Allahumma gfirli warhamni wa'afini warzuqni wa'afini wahdini warzuqni. Allahumma gfirli warhamni wa'afini wahdini warzuqni. You can say this dua in between both sajdas. So if you're getting up, you can sit down for a moment. Again, your hands will be in the natural position here. When you're getting up in between the sajdas, your hands will be in the natural position. Okay? Your fingers should be like just behind the knees. They shouldn't be like this, and they shouldn't be like this. I think that's what the brother was talking about. They should be just behind the knees. And at this moment, it's good to make that dua. Whether you are individually praying or behind the imam, both are the same. So the dua you'll make is Allahumma gfirli warhamni wa'afini wahdini warzuqni. Okay, this dua is good to make during this time. It's established through hadith, and Mufti Taqi in his book has brought many narrations to show that this has been established to the Prophet ﷺ. So you can say this in between the sajda. Of course, the second sajda you will make just the same way. Now when you are getting up for the second ruku, for the second rakat, for the second rakat, you perform the second rakat in the same way that you perform the first rakat, yes.
Is it okay to just say Allahumma?
Sorry?
Is it okay to just say Allahumma?
You can say whatever you know of the hadith, yes. I mean, even if you have memorized, there's 5 things. Allahumma gfir li, warhamni, wa'afini, wahdini, warzuqni. 5 things that you're asking for. If you only remember like 1 or 2 things, that's fine. You can just make dua for that. It's completely fine.
So if Imam is making a longer sajda and we are done with Subhana Rabbiyal A'la, so can we recite something else?
Right. So if the Imam is making a longer sajda and you're behind the Imam, you will just do more tasbih. If you're behind the Imam and they're in sajda for a long time, you will just continue to do tasbih.
Can we do some other tasbih or just the same thing?
You can just, so this is where there's difference of opinion, but you will not make, you can only do tasbih. You should do dua in farq, in sajda. Okay, then the second rakat, of course, is the same way as the first rakat. We talked about that in detail. Now, when you're done with the second rakat, you will perform the ruku and everything in the same way. When you are finishing the second rakat, if you are praying 2 rakats, then you will again keep the hands in their natural position behind the knees. You will recite at-tahiyatu lillahi until the end, and then you will say ashhadu an la ilaha. So you will raise the hand and you will say ashhadu. At that time you will begin, as soon as you begin saying the ashhadu an la, you will raise the finger, and the narration mentions you will form a ring with your thumb and your middle finger like this, okay? And so you will form that ring like this. You say ashhadu an la ilaha, and then when you get to the hamza illa, that's when you lower the finger. Say ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. So ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. When you get the hamza of illallah, that's when you lower the finger. And you should keep it like this with the finger not touching the thigh. Again, they've even described like all these minute details. This is the best way. With the finger not touching the thigh, just elevate it a little bit, okay? And you will keep the hand like this. If somebody does this and they put the hand back to the way it was, Again, that's fine, but that's not the best way that's been described. That's not the best way to pray. And then after that, after you're done with that, if it's the second rakat and you're ending the prayer, then you will recite durood. Okay? And after durood, you're allowed to make dua, of course, in Arabic. Many people make the dua, رَبَّنَا آتِنَا فِي الدُّنْيَا حَسَنًا. You can make other du'as as well. Okay? You can technically end the salah after durood. Technically after the durood, you can end the salah. But it's good to make the dua. And then when you're done with the dua, the way you will exit the salah is by saying, you will look over the right shoulder. So there's nothing that's any particular place that you're supposed to look over. You don't have to look at your shoulder. Right? Some people make a point to just look at, no, you just look over the shoulder, okay? And say Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. And then you will turn and say Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Okay, you don't have to stop in between, and you can just say Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. When you've done that, you've technically finished the second rakat. If you're praying Dhuhr or Isha or Asr, for the third and fourth rakat, it'll be the same way that I described, except as you all know that after Fatiha, you will not recite, you don't have to recite a surah, you will just go into ruku. Okay, so this is for all of those, the sajda, the second rakat and everything. Okay, then for witr, I just, yes.
When you're flying in the air,
Yes.
there's a direction of the qibla important when you are sitting in your car. See?
In the airplane. You're saying the airplane?
No, you say that airplane.
Airplane, yes, very good. The qibla is important. The qibla is always important, right? If you are flying on the airplane, as an FYI, okay, the ruling of the airplane is the following. If you are flying on the airplane, you should, of course, make an effort to pray salah. And you should make an effort to pray salah standing up. Because standing and praying, standing is fadl. You have to stand and pray. So some people, when they want to pray at work, what they might end up doing is they go into their car and pray. That's not acceptable. We can't just go into our car and pray because we're shy of people seeing us pray. And no, everyone knows, like, if you pray in public, everyone will, I shouldn't say, 90% of people probably will know what you're doing. I've had so many instances where I prayed in public. But of course, when I pray in public, I don't try to get in anyone's way. I try to pray on the side or anything like that. But I've lost count of how many times I've prayed and non-Muslims know what I'm doing. They'll say, even some of them say, throw in a prayer for me, brother. They know I'm praying. Even I was at Lifetime here. We and some brothers went to go play basketball, and it was time for Maghrib. We went upstairs to pray Maghrib, and we were praying, and there were some people who wanted to enter the room that we were praying in, and they stopped, they left. So when we finished prayer, we were leaving, and they said, we wanted to come here, but we saw you were praying, we wanted to let you finish before we came. MashaAllah, such nice people. They're very calm, they know what we're doing. So we shouldn't be shy or anything like that. Even I've prayed in everyone has these experiences. You pray in a non-Muslim airline, and they're very accommodating. All of these airlines, everyone knows what you're going to be doing. You go to an air hostess, non-Muslim, is it okay if I pray here? Or you just start praying and they're not going to say anything. But you have to know the qibla. Okay? So standing up is absolutely necessary. You have to make an effort to stand up. And you should make an effort to know the qibla. There are apps. There is an app called Halal Trip. Everyone knows this app, right? Where if you're going from here to Abu Dhabi, or you're going from here to Doha or something, the app will tell you which way the qibla is according to the time of the prayer. It'll tell you in the plane, this prayer will begin at this time, and it'll also tell you have to turn this direction to get the qibla. Right? So for the fard, you have to stand up, you have to be facing the qibla, and if you do that on the plane, you're good to go. However, if for some reason you're not able to pray, so for example, if someone's on Qatar Airlines, and Qatar Airlines has that, it's an official rule, you cannot stand up and pray. Let's say some Muslims start praying and the air hosts, they get very annoyed and they tell everyone no one is allowed to pray. Okay, at that point you have to listen to them. You can't really be stubborn or anything like that. So you pray in your seats. You will pray in your seat even if the Qibla is like the other way, right? You will pray in your seat as a means of showing Allah you're doing the best that you can, and then you will make qada of that salah when you arrive at your destination. So we'll pray in your seat and you will make qada of the salah when you get to your destination.
So
Yes.
when you get back, let's say
Sorry?
when you get back, let's say it was qasr salah, so you will just do the qasr.
If you missed the salah and you missed the salah that you would have prayed qasr, then when you make it up at home, you will do qasr. So if you were like somewhere and you were going to do 2 rakats dhuhr and you missed that dhuhr, now you came back home and you have to make that up, you will pray 2 rakats dhuhr. You'll do qasr qada. You'll not do 4 rakats. Okay, very good. Any other questions? Sisters, do you have any questions? Are there any questions from the sisters? No questions?
Regarding Sultan Salah,
Good. I wanted to talk about Sunnah as well. I'll talk about Sunnah right after the witr. So for witr, we've talked about all of this. We've talked about the Siran. Okay, good. 13, 14, we've also talked about this. Okay, witr. Let's just talk a little bit about witr. Okay, for witr, the same thing. Right. This is witr. So witr, of course, if you are reciting individually, you will recite a surah after Fatiha for all 3 rakats, as you know. And then when in the 3rd rakat, you will raise your hands for the dua qunut. Now, when we're raising our hands to begin our salah, where do we look? When we raise our hands to begin the salah, where is our gaze supposed to be?
Straight.
Sisters, that clear? When you begin the salah, you're supposed to be looking straight, not down. So many people ask, okay, if that's the ruling for when you start the salah, what about in witr? In witr, when you raise your hands before you do the dua qunut, do you raise your gaze at that point too or not? And the answer is no. When you raise your hands to do the dua qunut, you will keep your gaze down. So you won't look up at that moment. You'll keep your gaze down the way that it was before. And then you will, in the 3rd rakat after the surah, you will recite dua qunut. If you don't know, of course, if you don't know dua qunut, you can recite any surah that you know. Inshallah, any dua that you know. And then you will finish the salah in the same way that we described. Okay. All right.
I have a question about looking for.
Yes.
Because we live in a world where there are a lot of commercial advertisements in the back of t-shirts people are wearing and all that.
Okay.
They come to the masjid, people in the back goes obviously that looking for.
Yeah.
Now all the socks they're wearing, you got hands written and this and that.
Right.
So obviously you get some kind of thing in your mind when you.
Right. Good. It's a very good question. So there's also a question that somebody asked. I'll answer a question. That technically, when you're in salah, your eyes are actually supposed to be open. Right? Very important. Sometimes when people in salah, they're in salah and their eyes are closed. Okay? Their eyes are supposed to be open. But the books say that if for some reason, if you're going to be distracted, right? If your eyes are open because there's a lot happening, then you're allowed to close your eyes at that point. Like if you're praying in an area where there's so many things happening, then you can close your eyes for concentration. So generally speaking, you should look forward when you start the salah. But if someone is wearing an inappropriate shirt or something that you feel will be disturbing, then you can look.
So they actually sit on their part.
Of course. Well, it depends on what's on the shirt, but.
So I think one of the things you should be telling people here when they come to the masjid, they need to be mindful of what they're wearing.
Of course. So when we come to the masjid, we should dress in the same way that we would dress if we're going to any formal location, right? So that's very important.
It's the interpretation of the Sunnah. If you want to do the talking and lead the prayer, or the saying about praying without talking, it's a Sunnah. How is the preparation?
How is it what?
If it is preparation, right, and the Imam is
It's okay, yes. I mean, if you have an imam that is not wearing a topi while leading salah, that's 100% fine. That's not makruh. To pray without a topi is not makruh. The ruling of a topi while praying is mustahab. Right? So it's good. It's mustahab. The books mention that it's mustahab. It's not good. So if a person is praying without covering their head, it's absolutely 100% fine. I mean, of course, it's better to cover it, but it's not makruh if the imam is leading and he doesn't have a topi. It's fine. Nothing to be like worried about.
So what you're saying, that what I have heard, that that's a, like a 34/7 Sunnah of Prophet to keep his head.
Yes.
So especially when he's praying.
Right.
So any time of the day or night he's praying, his head is covered.
Right.
So you are saying that not having that is mustahab, or you?
No, what I'm saying is that wearing the topi is good. I'm saying if the imam is not wearing a topi, that's not makruh, anything to be really concerned about. Yes.
No, but Prophet is prayed every salah, regardless of the timing, with his head covered.
Well, there's a discussion on that, right? Generally speaking, yes, the Prophet ﷺ, we say that he prayed with the head covered. So the books say that it's mustahab, sunnah, right? They're very close in ruling. But the question is, if a person is not covering their head and they're leading the salah, is that something to like make a big deal about or to debate about or to cause an argument about? Absolutely not. Yes.
What about the ankles covered ankles?
Excellent, very good question. So if imam is leading the salah and the ankles are covered, they're not, then that's also, the salah will be valid. That action is considered makruh, okay? The general ruling is that our pants should be above the ankles, okay? Especially if a person is putting their pants below the ankles out of arrogance, right? But if a person isn't doing it out of arrogance, right, then many ulama will say that that's not sinful. And if the imam is praying and his pants are below the ankles, again, that's not something to like cause an argument about, debate about. That's not something that will break the salah or anything like that. Generally speaking, the imam should do that, but it's not going to break the salah.
No, I'm talking about individual, for me.
Individually, it's good to do that. It's better to keep your pants, your garments above the ankles. Of course, that's a sunnah. Yes.
Whether
Yes.
maybe you have answered my question because I wasn't there for some time in between.
Sure.
What happens if by sheer mistake a person recites Zuhar and Asr in a louder voice?
Oh, okay, very good. If a
Does that
person,
clarify the salah of the people following him, or?
good. If the imam, if you're praying behind the imam, and if you're saying, based on your question, it seems like if it was the imam or individual. Both. The ruling is the same for both.
Either way.
So if you pray the whole salah like that, or like if in the middle you realize, oh, this is Asr salah, I'm supposed to be quiet, and you stop, right in the middle of the salah, then you should make that salah up before Maghrib comes. However, if you prayed like that, okay, and you didn't make up the salah, and Maghrib came in, then you do not have to redo that salah. Okay? So they say wajibul i'ada fil waqt. That is something where you will redo the salah if the salah time is still there. But if the salah left, right? If it's Maghrib now, it wasn't like such a thing that would require you to do qada. So it's wajibul i'ada fil waqt. You will redo the salah. Like afterwards, if you just realize, oh, I said the whole salah, then you should do the salah again. But for some reason, you read it, and the Maghrib comes in, you won't have to do qada. Any questions from the sisters? Do the sisters have a notebook or anything that they've written the questions on? No? Yes. Do you have a question? Sure. We have 2 minutes till Adhan, so.
Two quick ones.
Sure, no problem. Go ahead.
Let me have this real quick.
I didn't talk about this stuff actually. That's something I'm going to discuss right now actually. Good?
Okay, that's
Yeah, so Sajda Sahwi, very good. So Sajda Sahwi will make up for any deficiency so long, but for anything that is like wajib or less. If you miss the fard, sajda sahwi will not make up for that. Okay? So if you did something and you're not sure if that broke the salah, do sajda sahwi, and then you can ask someone later on, do I have to do the salah? Many people this happens, okay? But if, for example, if you are in the first rakat of, if you're praying by yourself and you're in the first rakat of Isha, and you read Fatiha, but you forgot to read a surah after Fatiha, you went into ruku. By your first of rakat of Isha, you read Fatiha, you forgot to recite a surah afterwards, you went into ruku, you finished the rest of the salah correct, so you need to do sajda sahwi. Okay? The way you would do sajda sahwi, of course, is in the last rakat, after reciting the at-tahiyyat and after raising the fingers, okay? After doing the tashahhud, you will say the salam on one side, go into sajda, make sajda twice, and then come up and recite at-tahiyyat and finish the salam. If you are with the imam, okay, very important. If you are with the imam and the imam is doing sajda sahwi, you have to do the salam with the imam. Sometimes there was like a time where I was behind the imam and the imam had to do sajda sahwi. He said the salam, I did the salam on the side, no one else did it. Or like no one on the right side did it because I did it and everyone went to the sajda. So I thought, okay, we have to teach this. So if the imam is making sajda sahwi, you also have to do the salam and then go into the sajda, and you will finish the rest of the salah with the tahiyyat and
After Surah Fatiha, if you miss the surah, is it compulsory that you have to go for sajda sahwi?
Yes. If you missed the surah after Fatiha
Yeah.
and you didn't do sajda sahwi, then you have to redo the
So
salah.
the prayer is not completed without
Then it's not completed. This is again, we're talking about like the first rakat of any of the salah.
any rakat.
And no, first and second rakat.
First and
Yeah.
second.
So if you missed it, you didn't do sajda sahwi, you have to redo the salah.
And suppose you forget to do the sajda sahwi? and you
No, that's what I'm saying. If you do the sajda sahwi, you're okay. If you forget to do sajda sahwi, then you have to redo the whole salah. So if you read Isha salah, you did the first rakat, you forgot to read a surah after Fatiha, and you didn't do sajda sahwi, you finished the salah and you realize, oh, I didn't do sajda sahwi and I finished the surah. You have to do the whole salah. It happens. Where in your mind you know you have to do sajda sahwi, and you're telling yourself yes, but you forgot. And if you finished your salah and you got up, then you have to do the salah.
It's confusing because somebody prior to you in this masjid, I asked a question, and I was said, if you have forgotten to do the salah or sajda sahwi, and you have not got up from your position.
That's why I said that if you got up. I said that in my answer, right? So if your chest did not leave the qibla,
Alright,
right?
that's
If
what I
you,
said.
right, if you finish your salah, okay, if you finish your salah and your chest did not leave the qibla, you said both salam, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, and then at that moment you're sitting down, you don't say anything, you didn't do anything to break the salah, your chest did not leave the direction of the qibla, and then you realize, oh, I forgot to do sajda sahwi. Then at that moment you can do sajda sahwi. If you finish the whole salah and you didn't say anything, your chest didn't leave the qibla, then at that very moment you can say this, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, do sajda sahwi, finish the salah like normal, and you're done. But that's why I said, if you got up, if you spoke to the person next to you, or if your chest left the direction of the qibla, you have to redo the whole salah.
And you just said that while after doing sajda sahwi, we have to again do the attayat and everything.
Yeah, yes.
But I was performing behind some people where they just did the sajda sahwi and they did the salam immediately. There's imam, I'm saying about imam doing that.
Yes, so maybe the imam didn't know.
I have done this in Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, maybe the imam didn't know, but I know the Shafi method there's different rules.
Okay. But that's not wrong too.
If you're behind the imam, you can follow the imam.
If you are in that area,
Sir?
if you're in that area where people follow all the shafais,
Then you can follow the imam, right? If you're behind the Shafi imam, you can follow what his rules, no problem.
thank you, sir. I appreciate it. Thank
No
you.
problems.
Whether you forget to know this is so enough.
Yes. And if in witr you forget, so many people don't know. If you forget dua qunut in witr, right? Sometimes you'll remember right away, sometimes you forget until like, you don't realize until like you're finishing salah. But if you forget dua qunut, and in ruku you realize, oh, I forgot dua qunut. When you get up from ruku and you say, Sami Allahu liman hamida, you can do dua qunut at that time. You gotta do it. Otherwise you have to sajda. And if you don't do sajda, you have to redo it. Sure.
You start the salah and you realize you don't have wudu or something else is missing.
Sorry?
You start the salah, immediately you realize you don't have wudu or something else is missing that you need to have.
Like wudu?
Yeah.
Yeah, then you break the salah immediately.
Immediately break it.
Oh, very good question. I mean, if you're the imam, you have to stop right away because there's no salah without wudu. If you're behind the imam and you break your wudu, right? You have to get up. You have to basically, your salah's already broken. You have to immediately leave and make your wudu. You have to immediately leave and make your wudu. And even if that means walking in front of people, just walk in front of them and then go make your wudu. If anyone is in the salah, let's say, and someone leaves because they broke their wudu, and they are standing in the middle of the row, you'll leave that gap there. You'll leave that gap there. You won't fill in that gap. Because if you move, the next person is moving, the next person, and the one you have walking Jama'at. And so that won't be, let's see, should the women keep their elbows raised? No, very good question. Should the women keep their elbows raised during sajda? The answer is no. Your elbows in sajda will be lying on the floor. So the women will not raise the elbows during sajda. Could you please repeat the name of the book for the best procedure of salah? Yes, there's actually a book that Mufti Taqi wrote called The Correct Way to Pray. It's written in English and very concise. That has everything. You can actually buy that at there's a bookstore called Darul Hikmah bookstore in New York. Okay, I don't know if some of you are aware of Darul Ulum Madaniyah in New York. This is their bookstore, their website, Darul Hikmah bookstore. So there you can find this English book written by Mufti Taqi where he talks about the correct way to pray. And he just gives you the bare minimum detail. If you want all the details like the proofs and everything like that, there's a book that a Mufti, there's many books like this, but there's a book that in English that Mufti Riyad al-Haq in the UK wrote called Ascension of the Believer. I believe that's the name of the book. And it has all of it just goes through the procedure along with the proofs and hadith and everything. And if you don't find the book, then you can email the imam at bolingbrook.com email, and then I'll send you.
You have time for more questions or later?
Sorry?
You have time for more questions or later?
I think it's time for where